Welcome to The Curious Leader, a podcast exploring the humble and human way of new leadership. Curious leadership, future skills farming, and new leadership all have one thing in common. It's a humble way with great impact. Creating a culture, creating your culture, means cultivating people, teams, and communication along with adapting frameworks and principles how to work together. The Curious Leaders podcast takes you on to meaningful conversations. My guests and I will reflect and exchange on new leadership, the importance of trust, courage, and curiosity, on future skills farming as well, such as developing the art of listening and how to create a culture for creativity and innovation, how to deal with conflict, with misunderstandings, with different human needs. My name is Carola Zakotnik. I'm a keynote speaker, facilitator, coach, trainer, and also author and performing artist. I work with leaders of all areas to improve their impact, supporting them in creating new cultures and new leadership styles. And you can find more on Curious Leadership and myself on carolazakotnik.com. Now let's start with today's guest, John Ireland. He's a consultant, trainer, and coach. Works with leaders of all areas. He's originally English. And together we do some work on attitude. He, as an organisational psychologist coming from psychological aspects, what attitude does to us, how important it is to have a mindfulness practice in everyday leadership. And my part there, coming from the performing arts, is how to express emotions physically with your body and which kind of impact that has. But now let's welcome John. And let's talk to John what he says about curious leadership. Leadership is something you need to cultivate. Same with wine. It's amazing how more and more ladies are going really into the wine business and how they are cultivating something that needs so much of cultivation. And this is why I like to introduce wine always with a talk on leadership, because it's so similar on certain steps of the process, actually. It's a lot about daring to think differently, daring to lead differently, and I have a lot of words in there that are about trusting, about being kind, about being sustainably delivering good results, which implies a lot being knowing how the working system, the operating system of us humans works. And you originally are a psychologist, so what do you think is the best to develop a sustainable culture that develops kind of constantly, if that's possible, good results for a prospering company?
Good. Well, I think, you were saying daring to think and live differently, and I was reflecting upon this. And as I say before, all I can offer in this podcast is my perspective, based on my experiences. I think it's the desire and want to think and live differently. And when I say desire and want, then there's the first step of there's something there which I want, and our brains are programmed, to look at risk, to reduce risk and make sure that we're safe. So the basic biology of the human is, take care. And I think that this is a muscle that needs to be developed. And in my work, and, when you say about a culture, for me there are three aspects of this. And the first one is my own biography. So how did I grow up? How was I encouraged? How was I rewarded for thinking differently, for thinking, right, as an individual. I mean, a lot of people don't like people who think because it can lead to questioning and change and development, and not everybody wants that. So I think there's one aspect there in the biography, and I think the second one is in the culture. Is that welcomed? And slightly provocatively is my experience with school systems. Well, the question is, what do they do in order to allow space for thinking? Yeah. And questioning. So I think as organisations, it's highly important if you want to develop, both in terms of people and business, is an environment where there's time and space to allow thinking. And I think one of the aspects of this is, individually, but also in organisations, is the power of purpose and pictures of the future, where people are realising that just because it's the way it is today, which we've worked hard for, and it's recognising and acknowledging that, but it's almost like the Darwinian theory. If we keep doing this in a world where markets are changing, there's so many aspects of business which are changing, then we need to be aware of and have this desire and this almost this enjoyment in disruption. Mm-hmm. Again, I think it's very different. I experience it from different cultures, but I see big business progress in organisations that welcome and look for disruption. This opens up thinking, opens up product development, markets, the way we're organised. But you need a culture around that, which celebrates it. Yeah.
Very, very. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Just gives me a picture the way you describe it. You say like welcoming disruption, and if you put it a little bit more kind, it would be curiosity. A space for curiosity, for asking questions, mm-hmm. and having the time and the looking into depth to find answers to these questions.
Yeah, I think that's related to the thinking. I think strategically, disruption is about appreciating the value of this change and development. If you take the example of Amazon, and the effect it's had upon, the high street, this has disrupted buying, and it was done cleverly and strategically, and now so many people are using it. And you think about a generation now that doesn't need to try a pair of shoes on. They'll order two, try one on at home and send the other one back, And thus logistics are developing in a crazy way as a result of this. And, so it's a matter of, I think, do I want to try that out? Am I going to, maybe, I think clothes is a good example, to buy something over the internet and get away from standing there, trying it on in a shop. And both have advantages and disadvantages. But, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it's time for some music to relax the brain. Why Don't You Do Right? Jan Hirte and me, Carola Zakotnik.
You let other people make a fool of you. Why don't you do right like some other men do? wondering what it's all about. If you ain't got no money, they will put you out. Why don't you do right like some other men do? Get out of here and get me some money too. If you had prepared 20 years ago, you wouldn't be wandering now from door to door. Why don't you do right like some other men do? Get out of here and get me some money too.
And that was it for today. Hope to see you next week. Hope to hear you next week. We will again have John going on a little bit further what he thinks on curious leadership. Please think of subscribing to the podcast so you don't miss out on any episode. You can do that on carolasakotnik.com or of course on any of your favorite platforms for podcasts. Hear you next week. Yours, Carola.